is where we are. So number 6 says, solve 2 cosine of x plus 1 equals secant of x, and we're going from negative 2 pi to 2 pi. All right. So, I think, we definitely want to move this variable, right, over to here, right? But before we do that, it might be nice to write this so that there's not a secant there, so that it's maybe like a 1 over cosine. Because remember, it's better to have all cosines if possible, or all sines, or all tangents. Better to just have one trig function. So we've got this so far. Just rewrote this piece right here. And now we know from Algebra 1 that we always want to get all the variables on one side. So we want to move this over to here. So I'm just going to minus 1 over cosine x on both sides. So minus 1 over cosine of x. So I'm going to get 2 cosine of x plus 1 minus 1 over cosine of x, and that equals 0. And now remember that these are really over 1. These are really over 1. So we now have 3 separate fractions here. And before we can solve this, we need to combine them, right, into one fraction. So I'm going to start off by combining these two. These are really easy to combine because they both have a denominator that's already the same. So let me go ahead and combine those on the next page. So if we combine those, we will get this. If we combine those, we will get this. Any questions so far? Oh, it's hard to center my writing. Yesenia. You can either think of it as a plus negative, but I like to think of it just as a minus sign. Doesn't matter. But I think minus is better. Subtraction. Okay, now we need to get this into one fraction. There are 2 ways to do that we went over last week. What are the 2 ways of combining 2 fractions into one? George. Keep change flip is not the correct answer. Leslie.
Having the same denominator.
Okay, that's 1. How would I do that?
Multiplying the fancy one.
Okay, multiplying which fraction, the first or second?
The first.
And what kind of a fancy one do you want to multiply by?
Both of it.
So like that?
Over cosine.
Sounds good. Why'd you pick that?
Because you want to have the same denominator.
Good.
In the other fraction.
Good. So let's go ahead and multiply this. So we have cosine of x times 2 cosine of x. Remember, we're distributing here, is the math word. So cosine of x times 2 cosine of x is 2 cosine squared of x. Cosine of x times 1 is cosine of x. And on the denominator, it's cosine of x times 1, which is just cosine of x, minus 1 over cosine of x. And now, same denominator, so just subtract straight across. Over, remember we keep the same denominator. Hey, what's going on in the back?
The water spilled.
Okay. There's some tissues over here. Okay. So here we have this, and this is equal to 0. Is equal to 0. Now before I solve this, I want to go back and do this, going from here to here, using another method. So one method is the common denominator method, but there is another way of doing this. Does anybody remember the other way of doing this? Brianna.
Isn't it where we use the two denominators and then we
Yeah, you're doing it nicely with your hand.
multiply?
So it's not called cross multiplying. And cross multiplying is when you have a fraction equal to another fraction. I'll call it a little crisscross trick. It's really just a trick. It's not a specific strategy. But let me model that real quick. So the way the trick works is the following. So you start with where we started. And the trick is the following. You start by taking the right denominator times the left numerator. So this times this. Cosine of x times this. So cosine of x times this. You then bring down the sign. You then take bottom left times top right. 1 times 1 is 1. And finally, you multiply the two bottoms. Any questions on the trick? Now go ahead and distribute this, so you get what? Cosine of x times 2 cosine of x is 2 cosine squared x. Cosine x times 1 is cosine x. Minus 1 is of course still there. All divided by cosine of x. This is exactly the same as what we got here. These two things are exactly the same. You can do it either way. The answer will be the same. Questions? Okay, so now we know that the only way for a fraction to equal 0 is if the numerator equals 0. So we have 2 cosine squared of x plus cosine of x minus 1 equals 0. The only way a fraction can equal 0 is if the numerator equals 0. We do not really care about the denominator. Some people in this room automatically know how to solve this using factoring. If this looks problematic, I would do the following. Let u equal cosine of x. Let u equal cosine of x. This is called u substitution. We talked about this last week. The reason we know to make u cosine of x is because the cosine term appears twice and the cosine term is squared. So u equals cosine of x. Now rewrite this using u's instead of cosine. That'll make your life much easier. Rewrite this as 2. Instead of cosine squared, put u squared. Instead of cosine, put u, and instead of 1, well, just put 1. Now, everybody knows how to factor this using the box. You all factor on your own. I'm going to freeze this. But are there questions on how I got to here? factor it any way you need to. Some people need to use the box. Other people can do this straight away. And if you have done the factoring correctly, you should get this. If you do the factoring correctly, you should get this. Questions on this? And of course, this is still equal to 0. And just like Mr. Kurtz literally just said a second ago, split it up and said each factor equal to 0. Literally, he just said this 1 second ago. Zero product property. Keep talking. Louder, louder, louder. We're doing the same thing.
Yeah. Anything times 0 you just do. So we will find where the project hits 0, anywhere that we can find an S value that makes one of the factors equal to 0.
Anywhere one of the factors equals 0, the function will equal 0. So let's go ahead and do that.
This might look kind of dumb, taking the square root of 0.
This will not look dumb.
That's in order to build good habits. So get x squared by itself.
Okay, so now we get here. Now we get here. And at this point, we don't want the u's here, because remember, we're solving for x's. So plug in what u actually is. U is not x. Cos of x. So we need to plug in cos of x for u. I've run out of space on this page. Let me go to the next page. So we have, instead of u equaling 1/2, we have cosine of x equaling 1/2. And instead of u equaling -1, we have cosine of x equals -1. Now, think to yourself. No need to shout it out. Think to yourself. Which angle or angles makes this true on the unit circle? You're looking for an angle on the unit circle. Think about this. Where the cosine equals -1. You want cosine to be -1. Cynthia, what is that angle? Pi. X equals pi. Now you're looking for angles on the unit circle where cosine equals 1/2. You need to think, which quadrant should we be in? If cosine is a positive, you want to be in 1 and 4. Leslie? Not pi over 2. Pi over 3. And, very good, Edgar, 5 pi over 3. 1, 2, 3 answers. 3 answers. Now, we're not done, because the question asks from -2 pi to +2 pi. We only found the answers on the circle, which means we only found from 0 to 2 pi. We got to do that other part. If you want to think about this on a number line, what's really happening is this. This is a number line. Here's 0.